Hi everyone, it's John. It is May the 13th, 2022, and I just realized it's been almost 2 months since I've shown you anything I'm reading for the weekend, and over a month since I've made a video of any type at all, for that matter. So I just sort of wanted to get back here, maybe get in the spirit of starting to re-upload videos on a regular basis. Sometimes the spirit just takes you away. Sometimes it drags you back kicking and screaming to YouTube. But in either case, I felt I had a small stack of things I wanted to talk about, what I was reading today, and hopefully will be over the weekend, more than my usual one or two books, so I knew it was time to share what I'd been reading. So first of all, I'm going to leave my big project that I want to talk about until the very end of the video and show you some of the smaller stuff that I've been dealing with. Smaller in size and in, well, for the most part, subject matter, I guess. Certainly in size. I've been picking this up off and on for over the past 4 or 6 weeks, and I'm still only about halfway through it. But this is a book that was sent to me a while ago by a publisher whom I promised a review to, and as of 18 months later, I have not delivered. But as soon as I finish this, I'll write it. It's called The Cynic and the Fool: The Unconscious in Theology and Politics. Now, don't let the subtitle there fool you too much. It's not nearly as heady and woolly as it would lead you to believe. This book is about the little white lies that we tell ourselves when we tend to think about contentious issues. The contentious issues here that he's most concerned with being politics and religion. Especially the kind of fundamentalist religion that the author, Tad DeLay, by the way, has a very, seems to have a very contentious past with, and sort of seems to resent his history with, actually, if you read the book. The book claims to sort of analyze some of the propositions of Lacanian psychoanalysis, not so much through the way Lacan himself wrote about it, but through applied, the way that we would use psychoanalysis in an everyday sense. Why do we feel the need to have our ideas, for example, shared by other people? Why do we look for, why do we feel more comfortable when other people happen to adopt the same ideas we do? For example, why do children do some of the things that they do? Why do adults tell themselves the little sort of unconscious white lies that they do? The interesting thing about the book is that he talks about these principles from psychoanalysis, but he doesn't really use the kind of obscurantist jargon that Lacan and other analysts are sometimes guilty of using. He brings the language down to a very sort of non-specialized place where everyone can understand what he's trying to say. And despite it being so thin and readable and pretty engaging, I just have not gotten my way through it yet. But like I said, I will, and once I do, I will share my final thoughts. It's quite interesting in places, but I also think that if you're someone who is somewhat introspective and who thinks about life and its problems in more than a superficial way on a regular basis, some of the insights might be a little obvious, but I know that a lot of people don't do that. So, but then again, people that don't do that probably wouldn't want to read this kind of book in the first place. So, there's that too. But this is the first book I wanted to show you. Let's see. the next book was from a bit of a huge stack of books, actually. A friend in New York City who I met, probably a decade ago on Goodreads. We struck up a conversation when we first met each other on Goodreads. Her name is Lauren Albert, if you happen to be watching this. I don't think we've ever seen one another in real time. We're just Facebook friends. But maybe sometime on Sunday or so I can show you the books that she sent me. She was just doing a bit of decluttering, had about 50 boxes of books she wanted to get rid of. 50 boxes, not 50 books. 50 boxes of books. And this was one of the ones that I requested. And she kindly, for a song, just sent me. I happen to really enjoy the work of Michael Dirda. For those of you unfamiliar, he's a literary reviewer and a book reviewer who works at the Washington Post and has for I think since probably before I was born. I don't know if he's been reviewing books for that long, but many of his reviews and occasional pieces that he's published in the Post have been collected by him in several books that he's come out with, including this one called Readings, Essays, and Literary Entertainments. And this is a series of a lot, maybe 50. You can see the titles there, of essays of every single kind that you could imagine. Personal, books of recommendations. For example, he has one called Comedy Tonight, which is a list of his top 100 favorite comedy novels, or comedic novels. He has a really touching essay about his dad in here, and what an unbookish and sort of gruff but ultimately pleasant type of person he was. There is they just sort of, for anyone who is an adult book lover, something like this is, just sort of sugary sweet candy, just irresistible stuff. He does happen to have been sucked into reading quite a bit younger than I have, and he does have some interests that are markedly not my interests, like detective fiction and science fiction, stuff like that. But there's not many essays like that. But this is one of those books where you can read the essays and just with a pen or pencil and paper in hand, and you will learn a new name on every other page of someone you want to go read. In fact, this was one of the essays in here was a great reintroduction to Guy Davenport, who is a wonderful essayist and writer, and also made me want to go get a copy of Poetry in the Age by Randall Jarrell, who is one of the great essayists of the mid 20th century. But those are just two names that made it onto my piece of paper as I was reading the book. So if you don't know about Michael Dirda, this is a really good place to start. He's also written, I think, a book on Sherlock Holmes. He's a big Holmesiana person. And, like I said, has a few other books along the same lines, which I would encourage you to go check out. Next, small in size but not in subject matter. Actually, quite looming in subject matter is this. It's another book I got from Verso, which I've already shown but have never talked about the content of. This is just something I picked up yesterday, actually, and started it. Made it mostly through the first essay. It's called Writing in Society by Raymond Williams. I can't really speak to much of anything other than maybe the first 8 or 10 pages. So, from the introduction, uh, for those of you unfamiliar with Raymond Williams, he was a Marxist and a literary critic, and both of those identities are sort of central to what he did, which is basically found the movement of cultural studies, mostly in England during the 50s and 60s. And of course, cultural studies eventually found its way to the United States a decade or so later, and you know, in literary departments and stuff like that. But it's fascinating because what he doesn't just do is analyze a text. He looks at social movements and how consciousness changes and is changed by different kinds of literary texts that we experience. The first essay, I think it's called, Drama in a Dramatized Society. And he talks about how sometime in the early 20th century, we went from experiencing drama a relatively infrequent basis, mostly when we would attend, if you were lucky enough to be able to attend, a play, obviously, or maybe a performance of an opera, to a current society. And remember, he died in the 80s and perhaps wrote this in the 60s or 70s, so he doesn't mean in the early 21st century. He's talking about that now we live in a society that seems to be ultra submerged, ultra saturated with drama, in the sense that you can just turn on your television set and see a soap opera, for example, and how this shift from occasionally seeing drama in society or culture to being ultra saturated with it might change the way that we experience ideas, cultural concepts, ourselves. Like I said, I just started it, but as always, we'll review it. And Williams is someone I've only read the occasional essay by. In the past, I read a few things of his in college on my own, but this was actually a coherent set of essays, not just selections in a sort of selected essay set. But Verso has 6 or 8 of his books, I think, and I eventually want to make my way through all of them because I think he has some really interesting ideas about literature and its role in society and culture. Okay, so with those smaller books out of the way, I want to talk about the big reading project that's been consuming me for, I guess, off and on for the past 6 weeks or so. And it is this. Sorry, I was trying to pull something up on my laptop. It is the first movement of Anthony Poll's A Dance to the Music of Time. By the way, you can probably see Anthony Poll's last name there, Powell. He was Welsh. That is not pronounced Powell, despite the way you hear many Americans saying it. It is Poll, like the word Pole, like flagpole. So, A Dance to the Music of Time. This is a 12-volume series of novels, sort of a roman à fleuve. This is volume 1, the way it has been presented by the University of Chicago. you see these great Nicolas representations of Nicolas Poussin's wonderful painting, A Dance to the Music of Time, on the sides there. This, which is what they're calling Movement 1, consists of the first 3 novels. Okay? A question of upbringing, a buyer's market, and the acceptance world. And of course, the entire series of 12 is 4 of these. So I finished the first 3 novels, and it is really extraordinary. I mean, it's really, really quite impressive. Pohl, for obvious reasons, gets compared to Proust a lot, mostly because their respective works are, I mean, if you take them in toto, are 2 of the longest novels in any language. The Dance to the Music of Time runs to approximately 3,000 pages, if you count all 12 novels. But it's not just in length where they have some similarities. I mean, there's also some marked differences. The novels take you through, I want to say, right around the end of World War I, when the main characters are in college, their last year of college, actually, through the very early 1970s. And Pohl spent about a quarter of a century writing all of them. Came out with about one every other year from 1950-51 through the mid-70s. And so let me just tell you a little bit about it. You have a main character who's a bit of a cipher, sort of a stand-in for an everyday kind of person. His name is Nick Jenkins, and he has 2 really close friends by the name of Templar, who is kind of a skirt chaser, kind of not a ne'er-do-well, but he likes his bit of trouble, I guess. And there's another one by the name of Stringham, who is wealthy beyond all imagination and kind of reckless. And there's this third character who is probably the fourth, if you include Nick, who is the most memorable of all. And his name is Widmerpool. He is described in the novel as he has some really, really unforgettable descriptions of him in the first novel as just this very sort of plump, awkward, unusually dressed, socially kind of, like I said, awkward, loafing, has big black horn-rimmed glasses. And apparently, I've learned a little bit about the novels after the first 3. Apparently, Widmerpool grows up to be someone of quite a bit of political and cultural power. Maybe a politician or something, a prime minister. I don't know exactly. But it's funny that he gets these sort of weird descriptions, how socially awkward he is, and then ends up, we see a lot of the decisions that he makes, and he becomes conscious of his own shortcomings, social shortcomings, and the way he tries to correct for them over the course of the 3 novels. The actions in, I'm guessing, all of the novels, but I can certainly just talk about the first 3, is not really where the interest lies in these books, okay? One of the sort of through lines that the books have that they share in common with something like Proust is that the story itself is sort of secondary to the character development and the actual sort of literary quality of the prose. But just to sort of orient you in what's going on, I figured I might as well sort of give some very, very, you know, superficial summaries of what the books are about. Like I said, Volume 1 of Movement 1 is called A Question of Upbringing, and it introduces Stringham, Widmerpool, Jenkins, and who am I forgetting? Peter Templar. And it follows them through like I said, through the last year of their school, and sort of how their relationships ebb and flow during that time period. One of the characters who will also be reoccurring, many of the characters are reoccurring. Actually, his name is Labas, and he is the housemaster of the college that all of them are going to school at. The college is never named. It's not necessarily Oxford. It's not necessarily Cambridge. He never tells where it is. It could just be totally fictional. But that's the first book. And the second book is called A Buyer's Market. It takes place about 6 or 8 years later, so they're well out of school now. A lot of this takes place in sort of debutante balls, with people just sort of floating from one party to the next. Nick, the narrator, he has a love interest by the name of Barbara Goring. They also have lunch with sort of this business magnate tycoon and his mistress, who is another. Both of them are reoccurring characters, and when another reoccurring character by the name of Magnus Donners, who is the tycoon figure, when he dies, Nick sleeps with his girlfriend at the funeral. Sort of it's a very incestuous book, not in the sense of sex, but what you do is you meet these characters, right? And then it's like once a character is introduced, they are pulled into and sucked into the accretion disc that is A Dance to the Music of Time. So once Paul introduces you into the narrative, he never lets you go. You will keep being revisited in novel after novel and scene after scene, probably, I'm guessing, through the end, because that is exactly what happens in the first 3 novels. If he talks about you, you will eventually pop up somewhere else, at a party, at a luncheon, at a dinner, somewhere, something. And The Acceptance World, which is the 3rd novel, takes place sometime in the early 30s. So we're talking about maybe 12 or 15 years after the first novel. Nick has begun an affair with Peter's sister, whose name is Jean, who Nick originally met in the first book. But Jean is married to another man. And at the end of the book, Nick, Charles, Kenneth, who is Widmerpool, and Peter are all reunited by a dinner held by Labas, who, if you remember, is from Book 1, and who is the headmaster of their school back in college. At the end of which, Kenneth Widmerpool gives a really long speech, and Labas collapses due to a stroke. So, like I said, if the action doesn't exactly sound compelling to you, and I'm sure my description won't, please just pick this up sometime. Uh, Give the first 50 pages a go. Give the first 20 pages a go. And tell me if you're not often a fan of the books that I am. Probably, if you're watching this, are familiar with my tastes somewhat. Let me know if this doesn't just sweep you away the same way that it swept me away. My plan for 2022 is to finish this series. I already have Movement 2. This is in cellophane because I haven't begun it yet, but this has volumes appropriately enough 4 through 6. So sometime, hopefully before I bring you my next Friday reads, I will be cracking this open and we'll have a significant amount of it to talk about with you. So that's what I've been reading. Let me know what you've been reading in the comments. If you have any questions or if you want to review, like I said, everyone knows who watches. You'll get one eventually. It's just a matter of me buckling down and actually writing one. But let me know what you're reading, comments, questions, concerns, any of that good stuff. Leave me a comment. I love hearing from everyone. And I hope to talk to you soon. Bye.